A little Ukrainian town in the Ternopil region with a Jewish history. We'll tell you about the Maccabee Games, aka Jewish-style football. We'll show you exclusive artifacts of the Holocaust era that even many world-renowned museums don't have. We'll visit one of the most ancient Jewish cemeteries in Europe, and you'll see something that will truly shock you. It's the Cities program, and we give you the Kremenets town. People call it Ternopil, Switzerland. Remnants of the castle, the Polish cathedrals and ancient buildings. All that adds up to the town's European atmosphere. And who could have thought that only 80 years ago there was so much more Jewish flair to the city than the European version? According to the pre-war population census, the Kremenets Jewish community comprised nearly 40% of the town's population and had existed longer than any other Jewish community in the region. Can you imagine? In the middle of the 16th century, the Kremenets Jews already had their own hospital and a house of prayer. The community was very influential and developed constantly. The zenith of this Jewish community was observed right before the beginning of the Second World War.
There were more than 12 synagogues and, according to other sources, more than 20.
The Jews didn't just live in this region or simply exist to ensure religious diversity of the town. Rather, they had a paramount impact on the Kremenets' economic development, meaning the owners of most major manufacturing outlets were none other than Jews.
The Jews made a significant contribution into the development of trade and economic relations with other regions, which increased financial profitability and gave new opportunities. Also, Jews contributed significantly to the development of culture as well as education.
The community owned almost all of the hotels in town. At that time, in provinces, it was very uncommon. More than 10 charitable organizations operated here as well. All 3 town libraries also belonged to the Jews, and at the beginning of the 1930s, 2 Yiddish-language periodicals appeared in town that later combined into one weekly newspaper, the Kremenetzer Leben. Special attention should be given to the Maccabee Games, or in other words, Jewish football tournaments. They played an important role in the Kremenets sports life and became a foundation for all kinds of Jewish sports in town. Although, as it turned out, it wasn't a walk in the park. From the memories of a former Kremenets local, Manas Goldenberg. There were many obstacles in our way. Lack of funds, the town of Kremenets is in the hills and had no flat ground for us to build a pitch on. None of us had short trousers for sports, and our stores didn't sell them. And the worst thing was that a football couldn't be found in all of the town. However, not even those things stopped the Jewish sportsmen from continuing on their way to success. Having weighed these facts, we can conclude that Jewish life was in full swing here, but with the Nazi occupation taking place, the lives of the Kremenets Jews changed drastically.
Throughout history, this place had many purposes. There was a market and a market square. So much was happening. This site in particular, where we are now, used to be the ghetto territory during the war.
The ghetto was created on March 1st, 1942. In the local Museum of Regional Ethnography, a directive by the Commissar Miller can still be found. It was published in the local newspaper and read that all Kremenets Jews had to relocate to this district in the city centre that you now can see on your screens.
The population here was very dense. There were many houses. I would say even lofty ones, 2-storied and even 3-storied ones. Everything was demolished. There were 8 streets. According to the information that I have, more than 300 buildings that don't exist anymore.
Hungry and cold, completely lacking any understanding as to why. No murderers or criminals, just entrepreneurs, scientists, musicians, craftsmen. They all suddenly found themselves in isolation. They hoped to the last breath that the horror would eventually end. However, the ghetto didn't exist long. It was in September of 1942 when they started mass extermination of Kremenets Jews. Another valuable artifact can be found in the museum. It's the diary of a local dweller, Roman Kravchenko Berezhno. He started keeping it, being a young man at the time, in July of 1941, noting the most important events in town during the Nazi occupation period. This diary testimony was used as material evidence at the Nuremberg trials.
There are testimonies saying that a lorry was constantly shuttling from the ghetto to the shooting room, 20 kilometers from here.
The ghetto residents, as well as Jews from surrounding areas, were taken out to the military firing field with one goal, the final solution to the Jewish question. The things that happened there were more like a horror movie. However, it was very real.
Some were buried dead, some were buried alive. I heard numerous stories of elderly people who witnessed that. It happened a long time ago. Those people are probably gone by now. When the Germans exterminated that many people, there were many buried alive. Eerie sounds were coming from beneath the ground for 2 to 3 days, and that was horrific.
The Holocaust in Kremenets took the lives of 15,000 innocent people. In comparison, 15,000 is the same as the population of one of the little towns in contemporary Ukraine. In other words, to murder this many people is almost the same as obliterating an entire settlement. The ghetto territory itself was burnt down, the town centre filled with architecture from different centuries, including 4 synagogues, ceased to exist. Please note another unique artifact, the photographs that managed to depict that fire.
It's important to understand clearly that these shots could cost a person their life. The town was on fire for more than 10 days. They were taking pictures of exactly those events.
According to the researchers, there are different accounts of what could have caused the fire. One of them was the uprising inside the ghetto.
Only a small number of people survived during the Holocaust in Kremenets, and they never returned to the town after the tragedy. According to the 2001 population census, there were no Jews in Kremenets.
And now a question. What comes to mind when you hear about the sites of mass graves? When you hear about such large-scale tragedies such as at Babin Yar, or isolated sites like Susenki, Rivne, or just an unkept and abandoned site like the Anivsky concentration camp in Lviv. Now watch closely. The mass extermination site of Jews in Kremenets looks like this now. 2 memory signs, one of which symbolizes the Auschwitz pipe with the Torah scrolls on it. And only several meters from these memorials there are private houses, buildings and gardens.
There used to be a huge cremation ground here. There are none of these buildings that surround this area now.
People, being unaware of that, simply built their homes on top of the bones. I think that's scary. People have to have all the information before building anything. It's just a huge cemetery.
15,000 people buried in one place. Even using the simplest of maths, it's clear that it's impossible to bury this many people in a few tens of square meters. That means that all these houses that you see on your screens were built right on top of the bones.
This area should have a proper appearance corresponding to other memorial places where a certain tragedy happened, as a memorial place. I study the Holy Scripture. It's very precious for me. I know God's heart towards Jewish people. We know what a blessing is and what a curse is. And when this great number of people, Jewish people, suffered in this area, we understand that it's not just some historical fact, it's also a spiritual one.
The things Oleksiy Radchuk is saying can be referred to as the veil of silence, or in other words, it's a process of hiding or keeping silent, or even forgetting about the horrendous yet essential Holocaust facts. annually, memorial events take place in many countries. Their purpose is to bring the information out of archives and obscurity and challenge people to stop and think. They are taken past the places of the mass extermination of Jews to uncover the facts about genocide during the Nazi occupation in a certain area. Thousands of people around the world can suddenly connect the dots. Those countries, towns, villages where the Holocaust occurred have been experiencing decay for years. By the way, Germany, a successful country today, after the tragedy, repented for the Holocaust and shows the most vivid example of that. The local Holocaust researchers say that indifference is also responsible for turning this mass grave into a building site. It may sound paradoxical, though it's a fact. Despite the accessibility of all the information you've learned in this program, as of today, the history of the Kremenets Jewish community is the least explored in the entire region. By means of curing this historical amnesia, more than 15 years ago, local lyceum teachers decided to have additional classes with their students and study the history of their town in more detail.
At the time, in 2003, no one knew this. The things I discovered, the archive materials, weren't displayed anywhere. They weren't printed in the Kremenets press or in Ternopil region in general.
The Kremenets Lyceum experience is very unique, since the students weren't just left presented with cold, hard facts. Rather, they were provided with an opportunity in a practical way to learn to extract valuable information.
We formed a search party. There were 10 children with me as their leader. We went to the Kremenets archives, collected the old-timers' memories about Kremenets and the things that were happening here from 1942 till 1945. It seems to me the spirit of history is connected to the history of the town as well as the Jewish community history. And everybody's silent about it. Nobody's saying anything. Well, we do learn the history of Ukraine and the world. In Germany, for example, they study the history of local towns and cities. It's what they study. I think it would be appropriate to have this subject as well, the history of local cities and towns. Otherwise, children live in this town and have no idea whatsoever about the things that happened here.
According to the teachers, the locals lack knowledge not only about the tragic events, but they are also oblivious to the fact that there are still Jewish heritage assets present in town that as of now are completely forgotten. Say the Kremenets bus station, for example.
It doesn't even have a sign plate, so people know it's a synagogue. People come here thinking it's just a bus station, and there were a number of great stories about this building as a synagogue.
By the way, the Kremenets Jewish history became of interest to people in Germany. The town has become a part of the We Learn to Remember international project. It's a series of exhibitions in a number of Ukrainian cities and towns. Besides, the Kremenets Lyceum teachers got a unique opportunity to attend a specialized seminar in Germany.
In the Museum of Jewish History and Culture, they showed us how we could work with children at schools when it comes to discussing the Holocaust.
Today, Kremenets lives its usual life. This town, by the way, is a tourist attraction. Unfortunately, very few people remember or even take interest in its Jewish history. But there's something that won't allow the Kremenets Jews to sink into obscurity. It's this Jewish cemetery. It's more than 500 years old, and it's one of the most ancient and most preserved Jewish cemeteries in all of Central Eastern Europe. What's interesting is that it's located on the hills in a way that it can be seen clearly, even from afar in the town centre. We'd like to believe that thanks to the efforts of the enthusiasts, the future generations of Kremenets will be able to openly face history and conscientiously preserve the memory of their town for the sake of its better future. Erinnerung, Sergei Narozhny, especially for the city's program.